These Reddit stories are far from reality, but the last one questions the reality. Stick to the end and subscribe for more. I moved into my new apartment on a stormy night, the hallway dimly lit, the air thick with dust. As I unpacked, I found an old, musty diary in the closet, its cracked leather cover bearing an eerie inscription, "To he who finds this, heed its warning." Curious, I flipped it open. The first entry made my stomach tighten. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. You are not alone. They don't like newcomers. They will come at 3:15 a.m. I know because I was you." I checked my phone, 11:47 p.m. Scoffing, I tossed the diary aside, dismissing it as some elaborate prank. Later that night, I woke abruptly at 3:14 a.m. The apartment was too quiet. Then came the creaking. Footsteps shuffled beyond my door. A shadow slithered along the wall. 3 slow, deliberate knocks echoed through the stillness. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I checked my phone. No messages. Another knock, harder this time. With shaking hands, I peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Hesitantly, I cracked the door open. The hallway was empty. As I pushed the door closed, a decayed, gnarled hand lunged from the darkness, stopping it. I stumbled back, paralyzed by fear. A voice, distorted and whispery, rasped, "You're not supposed to be here." The door slammed open, revealing blackness. My phone screen flickered, buzzing. A notification appeared. New diary entry added. The book lay open on the table. A fresh entry appeared before my eyes. "You opened the door. Now they know you see them. Run." A deep chill filled the air. My breath formed mist. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Its limbs too long, its face shifting, filled with something malevolent. The lights flickered violently. The diary's pages flipped on their own. A final line scrawled across the paper. "They are inside." My phone glitched. The reflection in the screen stared back at me, but it wasn't me. IT smiled. A scream rang out. Darkness swallowed me whole. Morning arrived. Sunlight trickled through the blinds. The diary lay closed on the table, as if nothing had happened. A knock at the door made me jump. I hesitated, then answered. A fresh-faced tenant stood there, holding a lease agreement. "Hey," he said, holding out the same diary. "I think this belonged to the last guy who lived here, found it in the closet." I stared at it. The cover was pristine, no cracks, no dust. My breath hitched as I opened it. The first entry was in my handwriting. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. You are not alone." My hands trembled. In the window behind me, my reflection stood still. The diary flipped open on its own. I didn't leave. I should have. That night, I placed the diary in the freezer, locked my bedroom door, and tried to sleep. My mind kept replaying the events. Had I imagined it? Was it a joke? But at 3:15 a.m., I woke again. This time, it wasn't the knocks that woke me. It was the whispering. A chorus of hushed voices chanted unintelligible words from every corner of the apartment. The air thickened. My breath was ragged. The doorknob rattled violently. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. Another notification. "They are inside." The whispering turned to laughter, inhuman, gurgling laughter. The lights flickered, shadows stretching unnaturally long. My closet door creaked open on its own. I grabbed my phone and ran. The moment I crossed the threshold of my apartment, the sounds stopped. The hall was deathly silent. The door to my apartment stood ajar behind me, but no way in hell was I going back. I ran down the stairs, barely remembering to breathe. The building's lobby was empty. The front door, locked. The doorman was gone. I banged against the glass, but the street outside was eerily devoid of life. My phone buzzed again. Another diary entry appeared. You left, but it's too late. They follow. A reflection in the lobby's mirror caught my eye. It was me, but my reflection's lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. Then it smiled. I bolted out the side exit, my heart racing. I ran until my legs burned, ducking into a 24-hour diner. The bright, fluorescent lights felt safe. People were there. I collapsed into a booth, catching my breath. The waitress approached, setting down a menu. Rough night? I nodded. She glanced at the diary in my hands. You should get rid of that. I froze. What do you mean? Her eyes flicked to the window. The streetlights outside flickered erratically. She leaned in and whispered, They never let go. I swallowed hard. You've seen this before. She just nodded and walked away, leaving me with the diary. My phone buzzed again. They found you. The streetlights outside all shut off at once, and then the door to the diner swung open. Darkness crawled in. I live in a very old house. I'm talking old. It used to be split into two during the mid-1800s, and there was a railroad hub in my front yard. With history like that, deaths were bound to occur, and if what others believed was true, so were ghosts. Now, I'm not a particularly believing person when it comes to the paranormal. Usually, I can find a reason for any so-called unexplainable event that happens. But this one, I can't put my finger on it. My basement is unfinished. The walls are rocky and crumbling, the cement between the cracks practically dust. The floor is just mud, damp and uneven, and the ceiling is so low I can barely stand upright. It's freezing down there, and God forbid you don't wear shoes. You'll come up with black soles and probably a few slices on your heels. As terrible as that sounds, that's not the issue at hand. Every single time I go down there, without fail, the door is open. There are two ways into my basement. The inside door, which is always locked, and the outside doors, two enormous, clunky metal ones stuck together by layers of multi-decade-old dark green paint. After going through the Bilko doors, there are a few steps leading to an old wooden door. And if you somehow manage to open the metal doors, the wooden one is locked from the inside with a slide latch. Locking this latch is no easy feat. It's stiff, old, and slathered in layers of thick, grainy white paint. Older than me. Nobody goes down into the basement. It's cold, uncomfortable, and there's nothing important down there. But somehow, the door is always open. I joke about it to my family. Every time they bring up anything paranormal, I tell them, maybe check the basement door and that latch that never seems to stay closed. Typically, the door isn't wide open. Sometimes it's cracked. Other times it's open just a few inches, but never completely. We go down there purely to check the status of the latch, see the door open, close it, and leave. But lately, it's been opening more. At first, it was small. The first week, it was about 5 inches open. I closed it, latched it, and left. The second week, a foot. Still, nothing too alarming. I closed it, latched it, and left. The third week, however, it was half open. That was weird. But I brushed it off, closed it, latched it, left. Then came the fourth and fifth weeks. The door? Wide open. Open to the wall. The sight of it sent chills up my spine. No footprints in the dirt-covered floor. No signs of anyone having been down there. The same damp, cold room I was used to. But the door? Fully open. Both times, I closed it, latched it, left. I've told people about it. Every time they ask the same questions. But the only response I can ever manage is, my basement door can't seem to stay closed. The sixth time I checked the door, it wasn't open, and it was still latched. I walked up to it to make sure, and yes, my eyes were correct. I started to walk away. I hit the third step up, and I heard something. A latch. The latch. My head whipped under the short ceiling and the banister my hand was sweatily gripping onto. The latch was undone. My eyes stayed locked onto the latch until I saw a crack forming in between the doorway and the door itself, accompanied by a slow, slight, drawn-out creak of the door opening in front of my very own eyes. Goosebumps covered my arms and back. Every hair on my body stood on end as I witnessed what was behind the still opening door. The door finished opening while I was still frozen on the steps. Instead of seeing the usual 3 concrete steps going up toward the metal doors, I was faced with a small landing and a long staircase going down. It was steep and lit by dim lanterns placed every 60 feet or so. Part of me wanted to continue walking up and slam the door behind me, but the other part knew I had to look at the passage a little closer. My hand unstuck from the railing, and I ducked under the ceiling's support beams and ducts to creep toward the doorway. My goosebumps remained, and my hair still stood. I felt itchy and uneasy. I waddled closer and closer until I reached the landing. I felt my blood run cold. This staircase was much further down here than where I could see from before. What's down there? I quietly thought out loud to myself. My brain was riddled with questions. My body was filled with fear. The staircase was so dark, empty, unbelievably clean. I reached out and touched the walls. They were porous like limestone. The entire way down was the same color and poorly lit. I stepped onto the landing and my heart filled with dread. I shouldn't go down, I pathetically attempted to convince myself. I took a step, followed by another and another. I continued walking down these stairs. It felt like the air around me was getting warmer. I kept taking steps closer to what I'd hoped was the end. I looked up behind me and could no longer see where I'd started, only the dark gray steps on both the ceiling and floor. I let out an exasperated sigh and continued walking. It couldn't have been less than 10 minutes until I thought I saw something at the bottom. A floor. I definitely saw a floor. I hurried down, being cautious as there was no railing for me to grab onto. The floor was getting closer, slightly brighter than the stone surrounding me in the stairwell. I saw some more light as I got closer until eventually I hit the bottom. There was something on the third to last step. I tripped and tumbled onto the floor. I'd hurt my hand from the fall, but it was nothing serious. When I stood, I peered around the new room I landed in and soon noticed that it wasn't a new room at all. This was my basement, an exact replica of my basement, but it felt different. I couldn't place the difference immediately, but I quickly realized there was no staircase out, only the one I'd just come down. There was a vent close to the ground that I didn't recognize as well. I moved toward it. It was thin, grated metal. I gazed through the small squares and attempted to pull on it, but it wouldn't budge. I backed away. Whilst wandering around the rest of the room, I noticed a few more minor changes in what I knew as my basement. Some more odd vents, some spots that dipped down or where the ceiling was higher, until I heard it. There was breathing. I couldn't hear it over my own, but in the brief gaps of my inhales and exhales, I heard another person breathing. I looked around for the source, but couldn't locate it. My brain told me to retrace my steps, so that's what I did. I slowly paced back to each abnormality, each vent, until I reached the first vent I saw. It was louder. I felt it hit the peach fuzz hairs on my face. It sped up, got more breathy, turned into more of a growl. I backed up and started crawling back to the stairs I came from, my hands getting all cut up on the ground. The growl turned into a whine. The whine into a deep rumble. When I finally reached the stairs and started walking up them, the grate on the wall creaked into a loud crash, followed by scurrying. Something just came out of that damn vent. Not even looking back, my walk turned into a full-fledged sprint. I was not staying in this hellish version of my basement. That thing was coming, and it didn't care whether I heard it or not. All I knew was I was getting out of this stairwell faster than I went in it. I kept sprinting, faster, 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 fast. Okay, Now I'm slowing down, my legs were giving out, my head started to hurt. It wasn't slowing with me, it was catching up. But I could see the top now. Exhilaration took over. Adrenaline rushed through each and every vein in my body. Thankfully, I sped up. My heart was pounding out of my chest as I reached the top landing. That thing reached it. Not long after I did, seconds after actually. I slammed the door in its face and was met with pounding and cracking. It was going to get out, and I wouldn't be here for it. I ran up the second staircase out of the basement and into my house. Nobody was home. Once I slammed the entry door, I heard the thing in the basement break the wooden one. I hurried outside. Once I made it out of the house, I walked to the middle of my front yard to catch my breath. As I was looking back at my home, I saw it staring at me through the stained glass window of the front door. Its brown eyes, dark hair, pale skin. My heart sank and my eyes widened. Was I looking at me? When I was 12 years old, I had a friend whose fascination with the devil became a consuming obsession. She frequently claimed she had sold her soul to him, and while her declarations unsettled me, they also intrigued me. It felt like she wielded a power over her own narrative, akin to a character from a story I had yet to fully decipher. One day, she brought an Ouija board to school, convinced that it would be our gateway to the supernatural realm. Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself swept up in the idea of connecting with something beyond our ordinary lives. We decided to sneak into a dimly lit bathroom during lunch, our hearts racing with the thrill of secrecy. The peeling paint on the walls and flickering overhead lights created an atmosphere ripe for a supernatural encounter. Once inside, we turned off all the lights, enveloping ourselves in a thick blanket of darkness. Armed with only the faintest glow from the stray light peeking through the cracks, we placed our fingers lightly on the planchette, its wood cold beneath our touch. At first, as we attempted to summon spirits, nothing significant happened. My skepticism began to rise. I couldn't shake the feeling that my friend was somehow manipulating the planchette, moving it ever so slightly under the guise of a spirit's influence. However, the air around us felt charged, electric with anticipation, like static before a storm. As we continued, I stole a glance into the shadows, and my heart almost stopped. There, amidst the thick veil of darkness, I saw a pair of piercing green eyes. They glowed with an unsettling luminescence. Unlike anything I had encountered before, they seemed to absorb the surrounding light and radiate an almost eerie allure. Fear gripped my chest as I realized we had, perhaps unknowingly, crossed a threshold into something far darker than our innocent game had intended. These eyes weren't the fiery red of demons from horror stories. Instead, they emanated a chilling, otherworldly presence, sending shivers down my spine. Instinctively, I knew we needed to escape the bathroom. As I emerged from the suffocating darkness, I reached out and grasped her hand, feeling the cool tile beneath our feet contrasting sharply with the warmth of our intertwined fingers. However, as we rounded the corner, she suddenly paused, her brow furrowing and a look of bewilderment crossing her face. "Why are we in such a hurry?" she asked, confusion clouding her features. Time seemed to stretch in that moment, my heart hammering in my chest as I hesitated, grappling with what I had just witnessed. "What about the eyes? Did you see them?" I blurted out in desperation. Her reaction was surprising. She stared at me as though I had lost my grip on reality. "What eyes?" she replied, shaking her head with incredulity. She didn't see anything amiss. To her, it appeared I was simply anxious. I felt a wave of disorientation wash over me. It was as though I had conjured a hallucination, while she remained blissfully ignorant of the truth lurking in the darkness. After that disconcerting encounter, it felt as if she had vanished from existence altogether. There were no traces of her at school, no fleeting glimpses in the hallway, or murmurs of her name. My mind raced with unanswered questions and a growing sense of urgency as I inquired with teachers and classmates, seeking even a hint, a glimmer of recognition. Their responses, however, were the same: blank stares and laughter, dismissive incredulity. "I don't know who you're talking about," they would say, leaving me feeling increasingly isolated and bewildered. In the following nights, a gnawing sense of unease enveloped me like a heavy cloak. It felt as if reality itself had subtly shifted, leaving me trapped in a world that grew increasingly distorted with each passing day. Small anomalies became my constant companions. The paint on my bedroom walls seemed to shift hues mysteriously. A beloved book would inexplicably vanish from my shelf. I would catch a fleeting reflection in the mirror that didn't quite align with my own features. The most jarring experience, though, was the disorientation that came with time. Days blended together, feeling strangely out of order, and I would sometimes awaken with the unsettling certainty that years had slipped by while the calendar insistently declared otherwise. With each new day, an undercurrent of dread coiled tightly around my chest, whispering that something profoundly wrong lay beneath the surface of my life, a sinister reality unraveling around me, and I was the only one aware of this disruption in the fabric of existence. Weeks later, I received a notification from an unfamiliar user on social media. The name sparked faint recognition, and as we began chatting, a chilling truth emerged. She had tricked me. The friend I once knew was not who she seemed. She was a demon. By touching the Ouija board that day, I had unwittingly cursed myself, sealing my fate. She explained that each night my essence would drift through shifting realities, each one leading me closer to the grotesque realm of hell. Overwhelmed by the sheer weight of this revelation, I withdrew from the world. I barricaded myself in my room for a week, emerging only for food or to use the bathroom, too terrified to engage anyone. The faces around me, my family, my friends, seemed like hollow shells, mere puppets created by some malignant force intent on driving me mad. I had not lost my sanity. Rather, I had come to accept the crushing reality of my existence. It dawned on me that one day I would inevitably descend into hell, and there was nothing I could do to avert that terrifying fate.